Hey folks, I'm Gill, and today we are going to do a very quick and concise video on how to throw the Atlatl for more accuracy and for more power. We're going to be talking about two specific different techniques, one that I call the preloaded stance and the other which we refer to as the step. The preloaded stance is really good for closer shots, so let's just say 15 yards or in. Now this technique does generate less power, but it does improve your accuracy. So it's depending on what you're hunting, what the application is. But in most situations, the preloaded stance is more than sufficient for hunting most animals inside of 15 or so yards. Next is the step, and that is where we keep all of our weight on the back foot and we hold in the loaded position, and as we go to throw, we actually take a step so we can gain some extra momentum and extra power. This little increase in power is really important once you start getting to, let's say, 20 yards and beyond. Now, while you can still throw at, say, 20, 25, 30 yards with a preloaded stance, you're going to notice that your trajectory drops significantly. You're going to have a lot more power in the stepping technique, but you will have some diminished accuracy. So when some people say that they are more accurate with the stepping technique, that's typically because they are likely throwing at further distances, or they really just haven't practiced the preloaded stance technique. Because once you start getting inside of 15 yards and you're really practiced with the preloaded stance, you're going to find that your accuracy really increases, and it's a lot less motion. When you take that big wind up step and throw, and that's a little extra time and a little extra motion, that's when you're going to get busted in a close range hunting situation. Now, before we completely break down these different throwing techniques, I want to give you a couple things to watch out for to make sure that you're not doing. And these are very common, and so that's why I want to point them out. And one is not following through on your throw. So stopping your throw and ending like this is costing you both accuracy and a lot of power. You're going to see a lot of nose diving in your spears. So you should be following through, should be across the body and through, and that's on the big throws. On the softer throws, it may only go down a little ways, okay? But following through is exceptionally important. When you stop, that's what's going to be hurting you a lot, and I see a lot of people make that mistake. So your set should be built so the spur can rock this full range of motion without ever getting caught. Okay, so people that have to stop, it's because the spur on the end of their spear, it can't bend any more than this without either popping the spur or kicking the bottom knock end of your spear down. So another really important note for you. So what that follow through looks like is this. Now, along those same lines, you're also going to notice this with people that are facing the target when they throw. You'll notice whenever I'm throwing at a target, I am faced off to the side. And then that way when I throw, I'm using my body to rotate and rock and deliver the power into it. Now, when you see a lot of target throwers, if your only goal is to throw at targets at close range and be accurate, then facing the target and doing the very gentle lob, that might work okay for you, but it's really not good in a hunting situation. You're just not generating enough power to be a serious hunter. I'm not saying you could never kill anything, but facing the target like this and only throwing like this, that's not going to give you what you need to deliver real power in a hunting situation. So that's why you'll notice in those straightforward techniques that people use, you may see is their feet will be together. They may even step when they do it. More times than not, they're going to stand still and it's going to go straight in front of their body, and their follow through, a lot of times that's when they stop. They're just flipping it a little bit like this, a little elbow and a little wrist, or they may follow through all the way, but you'll notice that the thrower it never goes across their body, and that's because they're facing straight ahead as opposed to on the side where they can't deliver that cross the body throw. It seems like in your head that throwing like this would be the most accurate way. Well, it possibly is in that really soft flipping target throw, but in the hunting application we need to be able to preload some power and rotate our hips and rock through it and deliver that hard throw. Now, it is not inherently inaccurate to follow through across your body. So you'll notice the way that I throw as opposed to this, we stand off almost, I wouldn't say it's not perfectly to the side, and it's maybe more than 45 degrees. And then as I throw, my whole body is going to rock into it. And that's really going to generate your power. Okay, the next really big mistake that I see is, especially with new folk getting started, is they're in their ready to go position, they're pointing the spear at the target, they're locked in, and then before they throw, they pull their arm back. I see that all the time. What happens when you're doing this is you're pointing the spear at the target and everything's locked in, and then all of a sudden you stop pointing it at the target because you pull it back. It's like now you're not aiming at all. So this is really hard on your accuracy. Once you are locked into your target, it should be forward motion only. If you are stopping and pulling back before you throw, you are no longer locked onto your target. And it usually results in the knock-in going low or a lobbing effect. There's all kinds of things that this could result in. But the most important thing is when we're aiming, and we'll talk about aiming here shortly, you're locked in and you're aimed, you should never ever take the spear off of its plane that's pointed at the target. So the second that you pull it back, it's now off its target. You can practice all you want. You can point it and try to pull it straight back, and I guarantee you that tip will no longer be pointed at the target. And so it usually looks like this. Huge, huge mistake. So that's why you'll notice in both my preloaded stance and my step, you'll never see me pull back before I throw. It is always only forward motion. Now, it is really important that you have a well-built and balanced Atlatl, and we're not specifically talking about that in this video. I do have some Atlatl building videos on the Hunt Primitive YouTube channel, or you can also pick up a copy of my book, The Secrets and Science of the Atlatl. You don't have to read the entire book to know how to build an Atlatl, but there's a tremendous amount of really good information in here that'll help you be a lot better at the Atlatl. All right, so here is a great example of this. I will point directly at the lens of the camera, and hopefully you can see that the spear is pointed right at it. As soon as you pull it back, you see what happens to the tip? So once you're locked in and pointed right at the lens, as soon as you do this step and throw, where's the spear pointed? Not at the lens, not at the target. So that is your best tip for accuracy, keeping it pointed at the target. So now, how do we aim? Throwing the Atlatl is purely instinctual. It works especially on your peripheral vision or your depth perception, being that you have two eyes, so you're able to see the distance and the angle. It's like pointing your finger. Throwing with one eye would be extremely difficult because you're not going to have the depth perception or the ability to see the target from two different positions, okay, if that makes sense. So obviously both eyes open. You don't aim by shutting an eye. That's the worst thing you could do. And then what you're doing is you're essentially pointing your finger, not this one, we'll talk about that in a second, but it's just like if you were not looking down your finger like you're trying to point like this. It's more like you're pointing like this. Like you can still point at something but it not be looking directly down it, because you can't look directly down the spear and throw. See, it just doesn't work like that. So our stance is up a little bit higher. Holding it ear level kind of works, but usually it's a little bit higher, you're going to notice. So yes, it is kind of in line with my eye, but I don't typically align the spear with my eye, it's usually up a little bit higher because I'm not using it to sight down it. Because I can't generate the power that I can if I get a little bit further back and a little bit higher, because in this I can really throw it really hard. Here you're going to notice too, I can't throw it quite as hard and accurate. So finding that spear alignment is for you that works the best is going to be really important. But the reason that I say all that is because, again, I'm not looking down the shaft. Whenever I'm aiming, I'm pointing it just like I'd be pointing my finger from maybe down here. Okay, so there is an instinctual aspect of this. There are no sights on an Atlatl. So this way, when you get really good at pointing at a target, that's why the last thing you want to do is pull back and disrupt that point. So that's how you're aiming, is you're pointing it at the target and you're not moving it all the way through, and you are focused on gliding and delivering the spear all the way to the target. And one of the things that I see people make a mistake, aside from pulling back, is they'll point it at the target, and then as soon as they throw, all of their attention to the target goes out to the window. As soon as they throw, they just wing it, and they might even hit the target, but they're not going to be very accurate. So when you are ready to throw, it's not this spastic just throwing it as hard as you can. Think of it like how a train starts. A train doesn't just pick up and slam at 60 miles an hour. Instead, it's a nice, gradual, slow motion, and then it ramps up quickly from there. So once it's already in motion, once the spear is already moving towards at a slow rate, then you can ramp up the speed or the power behind it. So as opposed to just sitting here and then throwing it really hard, you're going to notice that when I throw, there's a little slow motion before I actually deliver and follow through. You'll notice it's like I'm already getting that momentum, the spear traveling that direction nice and slow, and then ramp up and throw. But I'm never doing a sling it really, really quick. It's a hard momentum throw, and that's why I'm using my body to transfer that energy. Now, as far as aiming, you're going to notice that there's some people that they get up ready to throw, and then they point this arm, and they're like, okay, this is how we throw. And we see these paintings or pictures of people going, okay, I'm hunting. This arm is out here. I'm pointing at the target. This arm means nothing, absolutely nothing. You do not aim with this arm. You aim with the spear. If you're pointing this arm at the target, I can point this thing all the way over here and still point this at the target. Do you think having this arm up and me throwing is going to make this more accurate? This is nothing but a distraction. You pointing with this hand doesn't do anything. Point with this hand. Okay, this whole arm out thing makes zero sense at all. The only time that you're going to notice, there are times in which my arm will come up. I'm never pointing at the target. I'm using that for that extra scooping momentum. So especially on a big set, this is like my normal hunter set for deer, hog-sized animals, but on my big sets, you'll notice that when I go to throw and I take a step, my arm will probably come up a little bit because I'm using that little extra bit of leverage in my body. This is just a counterbalanced weight. That's the only thing that arm is used for at that point. Has nothing to do with aiming whatsoever. If you were trying to aim with this arm, you ain't gonna hit anything with this arm. So typically, as soon as I see somebody get up to throw and they're aiming with this arm, I already know they're not a serious Atlatl thrower. It's like one of those immediate tells on something like, okay, this guy thinks that he aims with this arm. That's not how any of this works. Okay, now let's go ahead and dissect the throw a little bit more. So first we'll start with the static stance or the preloaded stance. So this way we're not stepping when we throw. Again, this is more 15 yards and in. I'm gonna pick the Atlatl up and I'm gonna point it. I'm not pulling it back as far as I can, but it's comfortably back and I'm stable and I'm holding it in position, and my weight is now rocked onto my back foot. Okay, just like it would be if I was gonna step, but I'm not gonna step. I'm gonna take the step now, and I'm gonna actually squat my knees a little bit, but all my weight is still on my back foot, okay? If you can do this, you're in good shape. All this is doing is stabilizing my body. Now I don't have to step. So I'm up and I'm gonna lean back, and as I throw, I'm gonna rock forward. Now, you're likely going to leave the ground with your back foot. That's perfectly fine. You should be doing that because that's showing that you're generating power. Also remember, you're not stowing like this and then throwing. You have to use your body. So here's what you don't do is this. Okay, see, there was no power generated and it was a nice gentle throw, and it's very hard to be accurate or powerful. Now this is what the throw should look like. Follow through. And when you follow through, you're pivoting on that foot. This one's either going to pivot or it's going to come up. All right, so one more time. Remember, we're trying to kill animals here. We're not trying to kill targets in paper. All right, now let's talk about the step technique, which is going to be very similar, but instead of in that preloaded little slight squatted stance, we're going to still have all the weight on our back foot. And your back foot is always, in case you haven't figured that out, your back foot is always the same foot that you're throwing with your hands. So it's these two together. It's never like this. That you can't generate any power stepping across your body, okay? You're always stepping forward with your two free limbs. Got it? Okay, so now as you're in the stance, all the weight's back, but I'm not preloading it. All the weight's back and I can just touch my toe here. And so when I have an animal that I'm setting up to throw, this is my balance point, is this leg. So I can just balance with my toe. And then when it's time to throw, again, that same straight motion, then I can step and rotate and generate even more power. Now I still use the step technique with the normal size Hunt Primitive Hunter Atlatl sets. These are the ones that are sized really well for deer and hogs, but they also, this is the pretty much the only method I can use with the really big sets that I make, which we don't even really sell these kind of things because of the applications unnecessary. Master this first. Once you have this, you're probably going to be building your own. But this is like a serious megafauna type set. This has a much longer thrower. I mean, this thrower is longer than my arm, and it's going to have a big, massive 10.5 foot spear on it that we're throwing, generating a tremendous amount of power with this. And now on these larger sets, and just like when I did the bison, which was with the medium-sized bison set, which is still significantly larger, every throw we take is going to be with that step, because realistically we're not going to be 10 yards from a bison, because he's probably going to kill you unless it's some sort of pet tame one, which we don't do any of that stuff. Sure, you can get that close to bison, but more spooky wild bison, you're going to have situations where they're going to be further. 20 yards is probably the closest that you're going to get, and that's always going to have to be generating a lot of power with these larger sets. So you're pretty much always going to use a step throw on the larger sets, but it's the up close work with the smaller game set, deer, hogs, rabbits, anything like that, that's when you can use that preloaded stance and deliver. But once you get to that, again, 20 yard or more stage, maybe even 15 yards, depending if the animal can see you, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Remember that when you're taking that extra step, yes, there is some extra motion. It's a little bit slower to deliver as well, because now you're actually taking the step. So when you have that preloaded stance, all you're doing is rocking and throwing, and that's a little less motion, and it does happen a little bit faster. So when you're really close to an animal, like you've seen me hunting hogs, it is a lot easier to deliver that up close shot. When we're at those longer distances, say 20 yards or more, that's when we're not as worried about spooking the animal, because it probably isn't going to see us as easily as it would if it was, say, 10 yards, especially if its head's behind some sort of brush. So then that's why we can take that little extra longer throw and really deliver a much more powerful throw that's got a straighter trajectory. So that's really where you're going to use that step technique, is to generate much more power.